Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Aaron, who is an intermediate photographer from Nebraska. This is a portrait of Aaron's nephew. He said that he was taking a lot of pictures on this particular day of his nephew, and he had gotten very comfortable with being in front of the camera, and that his nephew had an argument with his mom and sort of stormed off, and Aaron went back and found him on the porch and captured this completely different sort of energy than he had been getting all day long. And Aaron says that he shot this at an oblique angle or a Dutch angle to try and emphasize sort of this more edgy or different emotion. And Aaron shot this with a Canon 40D. He used an effective focal length of around 150 millimeters and at ISO 200 and f5.6 exposed the file for a 200th of a second. One of the questions that Aaron had was about this subject over here, the railing that's coming in, whether that was a distraction, and also had a question about the crop. So let's get right into it here. One of the things I do like about this image is, it's a picture of a young person or a child, and we can really sort of just get overwhelmed with the cliche of kids smiling and that whole energy. And these kinds of shots can be a lot more challenging, obviously, on all different kinds of levels, just in terms of your interaction with a portrait subject, if somebody genuinely is not in the greatest space, and also for the viewer. So just be interesting to get a discussion started about just these other emotional states that we don't see photographed as much. And in fact, I'll put up a link to a body of work that even got to the point of being controversial, where a very well-known photographer took photographs of children crying. It might be a neat discussion. I like the energy here. I like the different expression. I like the courage of sort of Aaron to approach this as a subject matter and to have enough rapport with his nephew to be able to do this. And the other thing that I enjoy, in addition to the expression, is just seeing the whole body here, and even how the body, with the feet flat down, and just the body language is going along with sort of this confrontation that we're getting from Aaron's nephew. I'm enjoying that overall shape. I'm also enjoying the simplicity of the surrounding, because it really helps me to get to the body language and get to the expression. I do feel like in this version of the shot that this is pulling me out of the image, because there's not really anything for me to balance it down here. I think if you had maybe something else over here that was framing that could balance this, right now it's a little bit overwhelming. Everything else in the image behind Aaron's nephew is pretty simple. There are really two big points that I wanted to make in today's critique. I've talked in several critiques in the last month or so about this idea of taking an angle to the portrait subject, and I wanted to come back to it today because this is going to give us something very practical for you to think about when shooting these kinds of angles. Most of the time it's going to work better to be in a situation where you have a portrait subject and either their face or their upper body, maybe even their whole body, is leaning off of visual sea level. So let's just over here in the space that we have say that this is visual sea level. You could be photographing somebody that's oriented to visual sea level in a way that we could say is normal. So in other words, the line of their body is perpendicular to visual sea level. We could say that's sort of a normal orientation. But you could have visual sea level here, and you could have somebody, let's say they're a street musician and they're playing a saxophone and they're really getting into it with their body language, and at some point they bend over like this. So this is their head up here and the saxophone's out here. They're bending over. A sort of classical way to approach this idea of tilted angles on portraits would be to tilt the camera so that the camera is now like this and it's tilted, so that you basically reorient the person in a way to the camera's angle where they're now at visual sea level, and that ends up giving you a tilted background. And that's sort of a more classical approach. What's going on right now is that, yes, the angle is edgy and that has an effect on the viewer, but I have to tilt my head over to the right to really get oriented on the main subject, which is Aaron Nephew's face. And I'm not saying that that can't work. It can. You see this done a lot more in cinema. Roman Polanski's famous for angles where if you were sitting behind everybody in the theater, he's put the camera, let's say, in a doorway, and you can't quite see what the actors are doing. And you can see everybody in the theater trying to lean as if they can see around the door. Pretty powerful to have that big of an effect on the viewer, but it works a lot better in moving pictures where you can set that up and then at some point release that tension. In a still photograph, I'm not ever going to get to that point. I'm going to have to keep tilting my head to look at the face. I'm not saying that this can't work, but in my opinion, more often than not, it creates more of a distraction than it does sort of communicate the idea. I mean, we can just look at what I'm talking about here. If I copy the background layer and then go to Edit, Transform, Rotate. If I grab the handles here and start to rotate this, and we could just pretend that we were doing this at the level of camera. What's interesting is that Aaron's nephew's face, let me let Photoshop catch up to me here. Aaron's nephew's face is not level. He does have his head tilted. And so if we were to keep rotating the camera to the point where we make the face straight up and down, so if you look at the eyes, and now that part of the portrait subject is at sea level, you still have an angle on his body and on the background. But now the main subject in the portrait is oriented so that the viewer can get right to that. The other thing that I like about that in this particular case is that this is more of a confrontational energy. And when we confront people that are coming into our space or we want to go away, we do square straight up. Our head will be straight up and down, and we'll take this kind of body language or have this kind of body language. And so to me, squaring the face up here is going to have more of an effect in terms of this idea of a visual confrontation. Now, having to do it after the fact definitely means that even cropping without coming way in, that we're not going to be able to crop this and then get to a point where we're not seeing the fact that we've rotated the image. And I wouldn't want to crop in on this to the point where I came in on Aaron's nephew's body, because I think the body has a lot to do with the energy that's being projected. There's things that we could do to try to sort of fix this with scaling and stuff. The interesting thing is I think you might even get away with this funkiness at the bottom of the composition. This is the problem up here. It's more challenging. Two other things I want to mention. One is how powerful hands are in portraits, and this is a bit of a distraction for me. In a perfect world, I wish that Aaron's nephew's hands were, let's say, on the knees, and they mimic this sort of planted, confrontational kind of energy. And I think that might be more powerful. Or maybe just getting rid of this, scaling this down so that it just seems like the hands are in the pockets and that's symmetrical. There's so much symmetry with the legs. Just seeing this little bit of the wrist poking out is a little bit of a distraction. And I think color is a distraction here. I mean, looking at this energy, blue is sort of a calm, peaceful color. It just doesn't go with this expression and body language to me. So we could just go to black and white. And when I go to black and white, I would be looking for a version in black and white where the tones and the clothes are all similar, so the face comes forward. On the red channel, you still have this separation of sort of very dark and then dark gray, and that distracts from the expression. If we go to the green channel, it's neat. Now the face comes forward a lot more if we go back and forth in these two examples, and I would push this towards black and white. Really interesting portrait. Really enjoy it. Really enjoy the fact that it is not the standard sort of smile shot. And want to say a big thank you to Lewis for submitting a great image. It gave us a lot of things to talk about. I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for being here. Hope to see you again real soon on the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique.